Have you ever noticed that, like, sometimes you can almost read people's minds?
Oh, yeah,
Like, you're picking up on all these unspoken cues and stuff?
definitely.
Today, we are diving deep into the fascinating world of gossip.
Ooh, fun.
We're going to be looking at it through the lens of psychology to kind of understand why we just can't resist a juicy tidbit. And, you gave me a couple of really interesting articles on this.
I
I
did.
think we're going to uncover some surprising insights about human nature.
Oh, I think so too.
So, one of the things that really struck me in those articles
Yeah,
is this idea that not all gossip is created equal.
right.
Like sharing everyday happenings with a friend,
Yeah,
that feels very different from the kind of malicious gossip that can ruin someone's reputation.
totally different.
Is there a way to like categorize these different types of gossip?
Yeah, there is actually. Researchers differentiate between things like informational gossip,
Oh,
emotional gossip, and malicious gossip.
interesting.
Informational gossip is all about sharing facts and news, which can be really useful for learning about our social environment.
So like, hey, did you hear there's a new coffee shop opening up down the street?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then you have emotional gossip, which focuses on feelings and experiences.
Okay.
And that type of gossip often helps us process complex emotions and build bonds with others.
So if you're like, oh my gosh, you would not believe what happened to me today,
Yes.
and you're sharing that with a friend,
Right.
that would be emotional gossip.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
And then, of course, you have the malicious kind, which is driven by a desire to harm or manipulate.
Right, right. So that's the kind of gossip we really want to watch out for
Definitely.
because that can have serious consequences.
Absolutely.
So I guess the intention behind the gossip plays a big role in determining whether it's harmful or helpful.
It really does. Context and intention are crucial.
I see.
Take the example of Susan and Hannah from one of the articles.
Okay.
So Hannah was hiding financial problems from her husband,
Oh.
and she confided in Susan. Okay. But when Hannah refused to come clean, Susan got really worried, and she turned to another friend for support.
Oh, so she was kind of looking for advice on how to handle the situation.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's interesting because on the surface, it might seem like Susan was gossiping,
Right.
but she was actually trying to help her friend.
She was genuinely concerned.
Right. Okay, I see that.
So was that malicious gossip, or was Susan just trying to help a friend in a tricky situation?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound like she was trying to spread rumors or anything.
No, not at all.
It seems like she was genuinely concerned for her friend,
Right.
and maybe even for Hannah's husband, too.
Potentially.
Right, because if he's being kept in the dark about these financial problems,
Yeah.
that could really come back to bite them later.
Exactly.
So it's not always black and white,
Oops.
which I guess makes it even more important to really think about the motivations behind the gossip.
Definitely.
But this brings up another point from the article. This idea that people who gossip frequently might actually have low self-esteem.
Interesting. Right.
So is that because gossip is a way to feel better about ourselves by focusing on the flaws of others?
That's one theory for sure. It ties into something called social comparison theory.
Okay.
So we naturally compare ourselves to others.
Mm.
And when we focus on the negative aspects of other people's lives, it can temporarily boost our own self-esteem.
So it's like you're looking at someone else's mess
Yeah,
and you're thinking, well, at least my life isn't that bad.
exactly.
Okay, I can see that.
It's a way of deflecting attention away from our own insecurities and creating a false sense of superiority.
That's fascinating.
But here's where the science gets really interesting.
Okay, wait on me.
Gossip actually triggers the release of dopamine and serotonin in our brains.
Wait, so our brains are actually rewarding us for gossiping?
It's true.
That's kind of crazy because, logically we know that gossip can be harmful,
Right.
but then our brains are like, here, have some dopamine, feel good about this.
Exactly. It creates a kind of feedback loop that reinforces the behavior, much like any other addictive cycle.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful insight.
And social media, with its constant stream of curated content, just amplifies this effect.
So it's like we're constantly being bombarded with opportunities to gossip,
Basically.
and our brains are loving it.
Yeah, they're getting that little dopamine hit every time.
So even if we understand the downsides of gossip,
Right.
our brains are still wired to seek it out,
They are.
which makes it even more important to figure out how to resist those urges.
Absolutely. Recognizing that our brains are playing a role is the first step.
Okay, so awareness is key.
Yes. And from there, we can start developing strategies to break free from that cycle and engage with gossip in a more mindful way.
This is all really thought-provoking.
I know, it's a lot to unpack.
So far, we've talked about the different types of gossip,
Yeah.
the motivations behind it,
Uh-huh.
and even the science of why it can be so addictive.
Right.
But in part two, I'm really curious to delve into some specific examples of how gossip plays out in our lives.
Yeah, okay.
What do you say we take a closer look at how it operates in the workplace
Sure.
and in our personal relationships?
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome back to our deep dive on gossip.
It's amazing how our brains are wired to seek it out, even when we know it might not be good for us.
Right. It's like we can't help ourselves sometimes.
So how do we navigate this tricky terrain, especially in places like the workplace?
Oh, yeah. Offices can be like breeding grounds for gossip.
Totally. I've definitely witnessed my fair share of water cooler whispers.
It's like the unofficial communication channel.
But when does that kind of gossip become harmful, and when is it actually helpful?
Well, when you think about it, when you start a new job, gossip can actually be a good way to learn the ropes.
Yeah, like the unspoken rules of the office?
Exactly. It's like a crash course in office politics and social dynamics.
So you can figure out who's who and what not to do.
Exactly. And it can help build camaraderie among colleagues, too.
So it's a way of bonding over shared knowledge.
Exactly. Especially in those high-pressure work environments, sharing a bit of gossip can be a stress reliever.
Okay, but that's a fine line, right?
Is.
Because it can easily turn toxic,
Oh, absolutely. When gossip turns malicious, it can really damage the workplace.
create a hostile environment.
Exactly. Lower morale, even lead to legal issues.
So I guess the intention is really important.
It is. If it's meant to support colleagues or build relationships, it can be harmless.
But if it's meant to hurt or manipulate, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Precisely. And this whole idea of intention applies to our personal relationships as well.
Oh yeah, we gossip about our friends, our family, our partners,
It's like a constant stream of information about the people in our lives.
keeping us in the loop, so to speak. But why are we so drawn to this kind of information?
Well, it goes back to that human need for connection and belonging.
We are social creatures.
We are, and gossip allows us to understand our social world and our place in it.
So by sharing gossip, we're actually strengthening those bonds.
Exactly. It's a way of saying we're in this together.
But there's also a flip side to that.
Gossip can also be a source of jealousy and conflict in our personal relationships.
Especially if it leads to comparisons.
Right, and social media has really amplified that.
Oh yeah, we're constantly bombarded with these perfect versions of other people's lives.
It's an echo chamber where information spreads like wildfire, and it's not always easy to tell what's true.
It's like a game of telephone, where the message gets distorted with every retelling.
And that's the danger when we rely on gossip for information. We're often operating on incomplete or inaccurate data.
Which can lead to all sorts of problems.
Exactly. Misunderstandings, damaged relationships, you name it.
So how do we protect ourselves from the negative effects of gossip in this digital age?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in part 3 of our deep dive.
So we've been talking all about gossip.
Really getting into the nitty-gritty.
And you mentioned some practical tips for how to handle all this.
Yeah.
How do we actually navigate this world of gossip?
That's the million-dollar question.
Especially since we can't just avoid it altogether.
No, it's everywhere.
It's woven into our DNA.
It's part of being human.
So spill the beans. What are your tips?
Well, I think one important thing is to move away from secrecy and judgment.
Okay, so less whispering behind closed doors.
Exactly. Bring the conversation out into the open.
Interesting.
If you're going to talk about someone, do it in a way that's respectful and ideally involves them directly.
So instead of saying did you hear what so-and-so did?
Right.
You're suggesting something more like, hey, I'm a little concerned about so-and-so. Have you noticed anything unusual lately?
Exactly. It's about shifting from judgment to genuine concern.
I see.
And another thing you can do is cultivate a sense of curiosity.
Okay.
Instead of assuming the worst, ask questions to get a deeper understanding of the situation.
Oh, that's good.
So if someone's telling you some juicy gossip, you could say something like, that's interesting. I wonder what led to that.
Yeah, you're not just taking it at face value.
Right. You're encouraging critical thinking.
And maybe making the gossiper think twice about why they're sharing that information.
Exactly.
So we're kind of taking back control of the conversation
Exactly.
instead of letting the gossip control us.
We're being more intentional.
That makes sense.
And sometimes the best thing you can do is just be silent.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to participate in every gossip session that comes your way.
Sometimes it's better to just walk away.
Exactly. You're setting healthy boundaries.
And showing that you're not interested in that kind of negativity.
Right.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
I know it's a lot to digest.
It's made me realize that gossip is so much more complex than I thought.
It really is.
It's not just about being mean or spreading rumors.
It's about connection, understanding our social world.
But we have to be mindful of how we engage with it.
Absolutely. We all have a responsibility to use gossip wisely.
Choose kindness over judgment.
Exactly.
That's a great takeaway.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Time flies when you're gossiping,
It really does. We hope you found this conversation insightful.
and that you'll think twice the next time you're about to share a juicy tidbit.
Remember, words have power.
So let's use them for good.